Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Bailey Howard Leonard. I'm a board member with the Permian Basin Adult Literacy Center. And I would like to thank you for joining us for our live author stream with Annie Whitehead. And a big thank you to Southwest 66 Credit Union for sponsoring our 2023 live streams. Hi, Annie. How are you?
Hi there, Bailey. I'm really good. Thank you.
I almost said good afternoon, but it's not the afternoon there for you. Where are you joining us from?
I'm joining you from the northwest of England, and it's just gone 6 p.m. here, so late afternoon, early evening.
So you're over there thinking about dinner, and I'm sitting here thinking about lunch. So can you introduce yourself to our viewers and tell us a little bit about your history?
Yeah, sure. So, as you said, I'm Annie. I'm an author and an historian, and I think those two sort of run parallel most of my life because from about the age of 8, I both wanted to learn more about history and to write. And those two came together about 10 years ago. My first novel, To Be a Queen, was published. And then I wrote a couple more novels. And then because I was doing so much research for the novels, which are all set in Anglo-Saxon England, so pre-1066, and I was writing a blog, just sort of detailing my research, and then got involved in a couple of projects and thought, do you know what? I think I could maybe write nonfiction too. So now I have that.
Oh no, we froze up a little bit. Please hold for technical difficulties. Hello, and we're back.
Hi there. Sorry about that. I think I lost connection here.
That's okay. I think maybe things would have been a little bit easier, back in the good old days when we didn't rely on technology so much. So as you know, adult literacy is our primary focus. Why do you think adult literacy is so important?
I think because it's such a tool for life. It just helps with the everyday, from the most basic things, reading a shopping list right up to reading books and beyond. And for me, literacy, communication, actually very important to the period of history that I look at and write about, is that we don't have any written records before the coming of Christianity. So, with Christianity came literacy, and without that, I wouldn't have a job because there would have been nothing written down, nothing for me to read. So I think it covers all aspects of life, really, from the tiny things that you need to get through your everyday life to, as I say, reading a novel, researching, finding out things that you want to know. So it's a real one of the building blocks of life, I think.
Absolutely. I love that. So you talked about how you've known since you were 8 that you wanted to learn more about history and you wanted to write. So have you always been 50-50 on those? Was there a time when you leaned more historian, more writer?
I think initially I just wanted to write. So when I was about 8 years old, I started writing little stories about Ferdinand the Hedgehog and his adventures. And but at that time, I was also living in York, which is a city in the north of England, which is incredibly steeped in history. From the Viking Kingdom of York onwards. And I was homeschooled for 6 months. My mother we never really stayed in the house. We just went out and explored. So history was always there as a huge love of my life. But initially, I just wanted to write. But I actually ended up studying history at university, and suddenly the two things sort of combined. And I never intended just to write history or historical fiction. I knew I always wanted to write. But I think those two sort of came together when I was, in my early 20s.
Okay. I love that you had that aha moment. and you went from Ferdinand the Hedgehog over to Anglo-Saxon history. So, can you tell us? We're talking about To Be a Queen. Can you tell us a little bit about the characters, the real life characters from the book? They've got interesting names that probably on this side of the pond we're not super familiar with.
Yeah, I think that's one of the huge problems with this period of English history is the names. And I always say there's a line drawn across English history in 1066 when the Normans came. And although we still speak a version of the language that they spoke then, obviously a lot of French and Latin words came into the language, and the names became unfashionable, as names do. So they kind of died out or they got modernized. So our modern name, Audrey, in actual fact, comes from the Old English for Ethelthryth. So some of the names did survive, Edward, Alfred. And my first novel, To Be a Queen, was actually about King Alfred's daughter. And she's got a very difficult name. It's Athelflaed. So I very early on in the writing process, I thought I need to give this girl a nickname, because whilst I do use her official name later on in the book when she's an adult, I thought this is too much to throw a really difficult name to look at and to read, especially if you're not familiar with the people of that period. And I did a lot of that with the other characters as well, although they were real people. I sort of either altered their names slightly or gave them titles that probably didn't really exist. But I just, for example, called one man the Lord of Wiltshire, because that was easier than his actual given name. So I tried to make it as easy on the eye as possible. But
I
yeah,
will say that helped a lot. I was
so
very intimidated.
yeah, she was pretty much, with a couple of exceptions, the only female ruler of an Anglo-Saxon kingdom, although she wasn't ever officially in England given the title of Queen. And it's really the story of her life and the fact that she grew up with the shadow of the Vikings just always hanging over her life. Her father was away a lot fighting the Vikings. So the book begins with her having a nightmare about these, what she thinks are monsters. And she was married to the Lord of Mercia, which was the kingdom next door to Alfred the Great's. And she had to make a life for herself. She wasn't initially accepted. And then she found herself, through sad circumstances, actually having to lead the kingdom against the Vikings. And such a fascinating character. I just wanted to bring her out of the shadows and tell her story.
Absolutely my kind of woman. Very admirable. So, can you read our viewers a selection from To Be a Queen?
Yes, I would love to. So I'll just set this up a little bit. As I said, she's from a very early age, she's learned to be terrified of the Vikings, but because she's not where the fighting is happening, she's never seen them. So they loom really large in her imagination. And she has quite a few misconceptions about them, and then gets to a period in the book where she's older, she's married, she's had to fight hard, as I said, to become accepted by the people that she's now ruling. And her husband is away fighting with her father, and they beat the Vikings in this particular battle. They don't quite trust them because the Vikings have this habit of pretending they'll go away and then they come back again.
Yeah.
So they take hostages. And King Alfred says, well, what are we going to do with these hostages? And the Lord of Mercia says, well, I'm going to send them back to my wife. She'll know what to do. So we join Athelflaed. As I said, I gave her a nickname, Teasel. So that's who I'm referring to in this excerpt. And she's suddenly confronted with these Vikings, and she's never seen them before. So that's the setup. So I'll read you a little passage now.
Perfect.
What am I meant to do with her? Teasel stared at the Viking woman, who was wearing a striking boat-shaped brooch. But this was no ordinary decoration. Its design incorporated every menacing detail of the hated longboats, including the dragon head and even a tiny face depicting the lookout at the top of the mast. Below it, a pendant shaped like a hammer moved up and down in rhythm with the woman's breath, glinting in the reflected light from the hearth fire. Her serving woman sported a bear's tooth as a pendant, and her hair was tidied behind an odd linen cap tied under her chin. Teasel looked again at the woman, whose breath flowed in fast waves, forcing the hammer pendant in a shallow upward movement as her breath came in ragged snatches, but whose face showed only haughty disdain. Teasel noted the woman's silver spiral arm ring that seemed to coil into a serpent's head, and she shuddered. She turned back to the hapless escort. "Tell me, and tell me plain." While he spoke, she continued to steal brief but frequent glances at this living, breathing enemy. The woman's brow was set in a frown. Her sullen face, filthy, was framed by braided hair. Her plaid cloak was like any that one could see on the backs of Englishwomen. The most striking aspect of the woman's appearance, save for her strange metal adornments, was her height. For she was only as tall as Teasel, who had long imagined that these foreign invaders stood 8 feet tall or more. The road-weary Thane had hardly stood from his bow, remaining in a cringing lunge as he told her, Your father took this woman and the rest of them as tokens of the heathen Hastine's goodwill." He flinched. "He also gave them gold, my lady. Lord Ethelred was not glad." "No, I can believe that my husband is far from glad." She glanced again at the woman whose arms were folded, and then back at the messenger. "Speak on." "Your father is in Devon fighting the settlers from the north and east, and your brother is following the host from Appledore. Your husband was on his way to bring these hostages to you when we had word that Hastine has already broken his oath and gone from Milton to Benfleet to seek out more riches. My lord has gone to deal with him." Teasel put a hand to her throat. "Who's with him?" "Lord Alhelm and all the North Mercians. And as I left them, word came in that King Alfred has sent half his fyrd to help them, and as far as I know, that means that the lords of Somerset and Wiltshire are with them now." Teasel shifted her gaze yet again to the ragged woman standing by the fire. She wondered if she dared to take a step nearer to ascertain whether these foreigners had a different smell about them. "You tell me of all the harm that this woman's kind has unleashed on our land, and look how she stands with her head high. What manner of beings are they, these Vikings, that they have no hearts? Do they even know our words?" "The high-born one does. Her women have but a gossip of English. What will you do with her, my lady?" She had no idea. The woman's life should be forfeit, for her husband had broken his oath, but it was not for her to mete out the punishment. She would happily send the woman for ordeal by fire or water, or throw her into one of the jails on the royal manors, but it was not her right. Until told otherwise, she would have to show her the hospitality and respect due to a high-ranking hostage. "I will feed her. I will clothe her. I will hate her. But I will not fear her."
Thank you. What do you hope is the biggest takeaway from her journey? What's the biggest takeaway from To Be a Queen?
Gosh, that's a really interesting question. I think it's that a sense of duty can be a burden, but also it.
Oh no, we maybe froze. Okay, you were on this wonderful We're here, we're back. We're on this
So
wonderful
sorry
track
about that.
about a sense of duty being a burden, but also being
Yes, that's what drives her. This idea that she's the daughter of a king. She has to do her duty. She's married to a man that initially she's not at all keen on, but she fights that feeling, but also knows that it's pointless to fight it. And actually, she comes through. So there's perseverance, there's determination, and she just doesn't give in. I think that's the important thing. There's numbers of times where she wants to, and she suffers terrible losses, personal and political, but she just keeps battling. I mean, I always say, I mean, she was a real life character. I've tried to portray her as accurately as I can, and I just think she must have been absolutely exhausted at the end of her life, because she was constantly fighting and struggling, but she learns so much along the way about herself and about what she's capable of, that she finally starts to believe that she actually really is a strong woman, and that's what I love about her.
and this was my first introduction to her. Why is she not more well known?
That's an excellent question. She's a little bit better known now, or well, a version of her, because of the Netflix show The Last Kingdom,
Okay.
which is based on Bernard Cornwell's novels about Uhtred, who is actually a fictional character. Athelflaed comes into that story. She's portrayed slightly differently as a warrior woman, which I'm not convinced that she actually
Not quite
was.
so much.
Yeah, but also that series didn't portray the Mercians in too good a light. But I honestly don't know why she hasn't been more popular. So she's almost unique in having led a kingdom in this period. And when I wrote my book about her, I did a quick Google search to find that nobody else had written a novel about her, and I was absolutely astounded, because I thought, how can this be? It's such a great story. Why has nobody told it before? So it's one of the mysteries about her. I always say she's a woman who's really, really remarkable, but yet rarely remarked upon, because actually the actual historical sources don't mention her a great deal. We really have to pick through with a fine tooth comb to find the details of her life. It's a real paradox, actually.
She must have been waiting for you, is all I can think, is she was waiting for the right person at the right time. So on the research, how did you start getting into the research? How did you conduct your research?
Well, I was lucky in that I had done a little bit about this.
Oh no, please hold. And we're back.
I'm so sorry about this. It's a really bad connection tonight. Yeah, so I was saying I did. Luckily, these days a lot of stuff is available online, so that helped. But it's just a question of trawling through documents and manuscripts and non-fiction books, just trying to piece the details together.
So I know as professional learners, it feels like there's always something new to learn. How do you stop yourself from continuing to research? How do you know, okay, I've got what I need. I need to work on it now. I can't keep researching this.
That's another good question. I think that the point comes where you've got enough to tell the basic bare bones of the story, and that you might need to go back and look up something in more detail. But a lot of the early drafts of my books are very much. She walked into the room and she was wearing a brackets, fill this bit in later, and they sat down for a meal of fill this bit in later. I think once you've got the sort of general outline, you have to let the characters get more involved and actually tell their story, and then you go back and you might have to stop and check, okay, I've put this person in this place at this time, is that realistic? Do we know where they were? No, we haven't a clue. Great, then I can just make it up as I go along.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's, yeah, I think that there just comes a point, and also there comes a point where you've done so much researching and you're just itching to get on with telling the story. And I think that's the point where you just stop researching and just write. And then if you do have to stop and look something up, fine, stop and look something up.
Okay. So I love reading. I think it's pretty clear that you love reading. What are you currently reading right now?
I have just finished actually this fantastic book.
Okay.
It's not historical. I just picked it up in my local library last week. And what I love about it, so it's called The Lost Storyteller. And it's actually the story of a young woman who gets contacted by a journalist who's trying to ask questions about her father, who mysteriously disappeared. And she knows very little about her father. She can't really remember much about him. And it turns out that he was the main character in a TV show for children called The Stowaway. And he played the stowaway who sort of ended up in various fairy stories and tried to help change the ending so he might save the princess from the monster or whatever. And she has to tell the journalist that she doesn't know anything about her father, but then she gets given a book of fairy stories that it turns out were written by her father. And they're beautiful fairy stories, but actually within them are clues to his life and where she might find him. So it's a lovely idea that she sort of picks up the clues. That's one aspect of the story. But also I just love the idea that fairy tales, you can write them to have a resonance with modern day world, as well as, we always think of fairy tales as being very firmly set in the past. But actually, we all love stories. We all respond to stories, no matter what age we're living in, no matter what our life circumstances. You can find something in a fairy tale that really resonates. And it's an absolutely beautiful book. I loved it.
Well, I've just added it to my want to read list. So thank you for that. The list is not long enough already. So if people want to know more, how do they find you? Website? How do they get you?
Yeah, my website's got all my details, all my contact details, my social media. So I'm anniewhiteheadauthor.co.uk.
Perfect. Awesome. So what's next? What are you working on?
Oh, lots of stuff. So I'm currently writing my third nonfiction book, which is going to be all about murder in Anglo-Saxon England. There's a book coming out towards the end of the year, which is an anthology. It's called Kings and Queens of England, and I've contributed a chapter to that. I'm working on a novel, which is set in the years just following To Be a Queen, actually. And I'm also contributing to an upcoming fiction anthology that's going to be out towards the end of the year. So yeah, I'm pretty busy at the moment.
Oh my gosh, are you sleeping? Are you taking care of yourself?
Not too much at the moment. I'm doing, there's a big festival all to do with Athelflaed in Tamworth, where she died, this coming weekend. And I'm traveling down there to give 2 talks. And one of them obviously is going to be about her. So that's going to be fun. There's going to be a reenactment camp and lots of Anglo-Saxon crafts and music and lots of authors giving talks. So I'm really looking forward to that.
That sounds very cool. Unfortunately, I cannot get there in time. That sounds very cool. Well, I want to say thank you to Annie Whitehead for joining us this afternoon or this evening for you. Check out her website. She's got a lot of blog posts. She's got a lot of books available, including To Be a Queen, which is available now at your favorite book retailer. Thank you so much and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you very much. It's been lovely chatting to you.